Are you planning your own startup but you're unsure of what privileges and or benefits you can get from your government? Well, on today's episode of The Pivot, Attorney Piñol and I will be dissecting Republic Act 11337, otherwise known as the Innovative Startup Act, and we'll be breaking it down for you in bite-sized pieces so you can digest it properly.
Exactly. So it's an often overlooked incentive provided by the government which helps a lot of startups, but not a lot of entrepreneurs know this. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the first episode of The Pivot. I'm James Deakin.
And I'm Attorney Bernice Piñol.
Now, before we get into the whole Startup Act or Republic Act 11337, we're going to give you a bit of the lowdown and a bit of the background. I think people really need to know what was the motivation behind this show. What problems are we trying to solve? Well, we're really trying to break down what it takes to get into the whole new digital economy. And the good news here is there is a Republic Act supporting it. So perhaps, Attorney, you want to give people what got you involved in this and why you're so passionate about starting the show, The Pivot.
Yeah. So The Pivot is a weekly talk show that discusses legal matters and its impact on the Philippine business landscape and innovation also. So we're big believers of, startups and innovation and entrepreneurs, and we want to help them the best way we can through our conversations.
Yes, of course. And you know what? We're not only going to dissect and explain all these legal matters to you and how we can flesh this out for your day-to-day activities. But also, I think what's interesting is we're also going to be bringing in some experts into the show so that we can get fresh perspectives. We really want people to get some value out of the show. This has got to be a resource where people can really look at as how to build your future in the digital economy.
Exactly, that's so true. And also, this is not just about the two of us. It's also about you guys, and we want you guys to get involved. So if you want to suggest any topic, let's say, on your mind for the future episodes, you can write that down in our comment section below and we'll look into it.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. This is a collaborative effort, and that means you have got to be a working part of this machinery. We're all equal cogs in this, and another equal cog would be the guests that we bring on the show.
Yes.
So why don't we get straight into it, and what do we got on our plate today?
So for this episode, it's the Philippine Startup Act of 2019. So in the month of April 2019, the Philippines has signed into law RA 11337, or the Innovative Startup Act. But not a lot of entrepreneurs or businessmen know the legal and practical benefits they have as provided in the law. So this RA actually helps startups and startup enablers by providing incentives that include travel grants, access to a startup venture fund, as well as assistance in getting visas and business permits.
So in a way, this is designed to, I guess, strengthen, promote, and develop the Philippine startup ecosystem. In your own opinion, is it a good law? Does it actually do that? I mean, I hate to sound like the skeptic here, but some people they might think, look, what do these dinosaurs know about tech, right? I'm not pinpointing anyone. I'm just trying to share some concerns that people might have. It's a new space. Do you think that the laws are crafted well and will actually encourage people?
Yeah, without any political color or anything, I think one of the proponents here, or the main proponent here, is Senator Bam Aquino. So he's pretty young, right? And I think I read through the law and the IRR. It's very impressive, actually, and I think it's exactly what we're waiting for, in the startup ecosystem. It's a kind of support from the government that goes beyond the funding, but also creates infrastructure and creates agencies to assist these startups and even the investors. So I think it's a very good law.
Well, that's great. So it's not just ticking boxes. Hindi pakita lang, in other words. All right, so
just like a compliance. Okay, check. Great. I have a bill.
Now that we put that out of the way here, what's in your opinion your personal favorite part of the law? Is there anything that grabs you and go, well, this is really for me what really makes the law work?
I think it's the creation of the venture fund or like the funding. Because whether we want to deny it or not, it's really all about the money most of the time, right? Because startups are always going to be struggling with their capital, so they need capital, and so they need funding. So the law even provides for that, and I think the DTI are going to secure like 1 billion peso budget just to give out to startup companies, and sometimes they would ask for equity in exchange for the funding that they'll give. So in the year 2020, they were able to secure 200 million pesos, I think, of funding for these startups. So that, I think, it's such a huge boost, and it's very practical, right? Aside from all the support like the visas and the eco zones and whatnot, it's really the funding that's very important for these startups.
And the funding we're looking at, I think we're talking offline, you're talking about 100 billion?
No, 1 billion pesos.
1 billion pesos.
In 2020, it's 200 million.
All right. So now when you're trying to attract that kind of money, you need framework. I mean, so this is a good thing, both for the people who are investing and the people who are getting the investments, is you want to make that channel as smooth as possible.
That's right.
By giving people the reassurance, if it's a venture capitalist that's putting money in, they're getting protected by the DTI now.
Exactly.
And they're getting protected as well as the person who's getting the investment.
Yeah.
So we're attracting more. Now, what sort of numbers are we looking at here? I've been reading there's about 700 startups in the Philippines and counting.
Yeah, that's a lot.
What does your figures tell you? Or
around that also, like 700 startups, and you have like incubators also, you have investors, you have angel investors. So the numbers are getting high for the Philippines, you know. Before it used to be, you know, it's unheard of, right? So now we're kind of like gaining traction in the startup ecosystem. So
can we just clear up for some people who might have just joined us or who are new to, well, everyone's new to the show. Who are we kidding, right? It's our first episode. So for those who are not, what exactly is a startup? When we refer to a startup, the definition of the word must be defined as this can be a little bit vague. Somebody might say, I have a sari-sari store. Is that a startup? I made an ube cheese pandesal.
Did you?
No, but if they do, right?
That sounds really good.
A lot of people pivoted into that.
Yeah.
Would you consider that a startup? Where do you draw that line?
Yeah, that's a very good question actually, and that's a common question. You know, like what is a startup, right? So by Philippine jurisdiction and by Philippine laws, based on the law that we were discussing now, a startup means any person or registered entity in the Philippines which aims to develop an innovative product, process, or business model. But we're both aware that that's not the only definition out there, especially, you know, this is like a worldwide thing and you have several definitions, right, of what a startup is, right? But it's usually like tech empowered.
Okay, well, I have a few descriptions I'd like to read for some people here. That's word for word. According to Investopedia, a startup is a company that is in the initial stages of business. I think that's self-explanatory. Until the business gets off the ground, the startup is often financed by its founders and may attempt to attract outside investment. Another one is that the many funding sources for startups include family and friends, venture capitalists, crowdfunding, and loans. Does the IR or the law incorporate the crowdfunding as well?
I think it does.
There's something in there? That's great. Startups must also consider where they'll do business and their legal structure. And startups also come with high risk, as failure is very possible, but they can also be very unique places to work with great benefits, focus on innovation, and great opportunities to learn. In fact, I have a friend who is very much into startup. He was from Grab. I'm sure a lot of people remember Brian from Grab, and he was one of those people that he would only invest in something that had like 100x. Which meant that he used to fail about 50 times before he got that. So it's high risk, high gain.
Very
though.
high risk,
But that's the nature of a startup business. So in a way, this Philippine law is so timely because it reduces a little bit of that vulnerability or the volatility. It takes a little bit out of it. Not everyone has the same appetite as Brian. If you're watching, that's a kind of crazy appetite to have, but that's his risk appetite. For people who want to get into it, do you feel that this law helps to, lack of a better term, democratize that volatility?
For sure. It kind of like, you know, cushions the blow, especially for startups who really have nothing to start with, right? So you have the government assistance to help them out. And so when they, you know, lose the business or it was a failure, it's not so painful on their part, right? Because you have the government supporting them. So I think that's very important. And going back to your definition of a startup, I think, to put it simply, I mean, for those who are watching and listening, that it's basically just scalable and it solves an old problem in a new way, right? So that's the most simple definition I could think of, right? It solves an old problem in a new way. Let's say like Grab, right? Traffic is an old problem, which you're very passionate about, right? So it's an old problem, but how do you solve it in a new way? By creating apps that will, you know, link passengers and Grab cars more efficiently and faster, right? So that's how you define startups, and they're usually tech empowered.
And you can say, or a lot of experts have been saying, and I agree too, that this is the decade of disruption. 2030. We're not talking about just transport. We're talking about the 5 pillars of the global economy. I mean, transport's already been almost completely disrupted, but there's still a lot of room to go.
Right.
Information we thought was disrupted, but it's getting disrupted again with the blockchain.
Right.
So we're looking at now decentralized.
That's for another episode.
It's for another episode. But even when outside the cryptocurrency space, information we thought Facebook was a disruptor, and after the whistleblower, I think we can all say, well, we're back to square one. In fact, worse, because it's one private company now that is acting as the judge, jury, and executioner for freedom of speech. So there's also foods being disrupted. We've got natural resources being disrupted. So many things are getting disrupted. So this is the time where you're really going to want to invest on how you can solve a problem better.
Yeah.
That's essentially what a disruptor is, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the word disruptive, because that's what startups are all about. Disrupting the industry, disrupting the way we live in a good way, right? Like, can you imagine our lives before, let's say, Instagram, right? Or before Food Panda, let's say. We're not promoting, but like before, it's completely different, right? So startups are also very disruptive in nature, in the industry and also, in our personal lives. Like, do you remember video renting stores?
No,
right?
Of course not. It's way before my time, but I have friends like Direct Noel who remembers that very well.
Right. So
he used
now
to rent out Laserdiscs and
Betamax. Betamax. No, I was still a child then. But no, you don't see them anymore, right? Because you have Netflix. So Netflix disrupted all these video rentals, stores. So yeah, it's the correct term.
All right. Well, we'll be talking a bit more about that, because it's certainly a very important part of what we're talking about with startup law. I just want to clear up for some people who might be watching. Do you have to qualify? Are there any benefits or incentives for the act? Anyone qualifies?
Yes, exactly. So for you to qualify in this, in the benefits, you have to fall under the startup definition that we've described. And so also the program covers businesses that will develop innovative product, process, or business model.
So your TikTok account is not necessarily a startup?
No, not really. TikTok, the app itself.
The app, but if you have your own channel, you can't.
No. Yeah.
I tried.
Sorry. Don't push it. No. But so it's innovative in nature. So while not really limited to tech startups, it seems to lean towards that, direction. And when you say innovative product, it means, a good or service that is new or significantly improved, whether in terms of, let's say, component materials or product software, right? So the operative word is innovative. So innovative can also mean like improvements in production or delivery. So going back to your sari-sari store illustration, it's not really a startup based on our definition, based on Philippine laws, because it's not really innovative. Because it's always been used, right? But
it's part of the legacy system.
How do you think we can make it into a startup?
That's the thought there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you sell your sari-sari store products through like an online app, and you tell your neighbor like, I have this, and then you have like an app to, and then delivery comes with it. So that's an innovation right there, and that could be a startup, right?
So in other words, we go back to the disruption. How did you reinvent that whole space or solve problems for people and make it more efficient? If you can get that perfect intersection, then you become a successful disruptor.
Yes.
But like we said, there's so much that's ripe for disruption right now. And what's very important about having a law in place is not just on the being protected and all this. It's a psychological advantage, because remember, we're dealing with a lot of brain power. These are new ideas and stuff. You want to create a fertile landscape for that.
Exactly.
For people to feel like, look, this is a friendly place to think out of the box with.
Right.
That's what we want to be known with. In the way the Philippines is as a third world or developing country, when you compare ourselves to America, the Western countries that have been established with all that infrastructure, it's so hard to compete with that legacy system.
Exactly.
So in a way, this is a blessing for us. Would you agree? So this new age has basically democratized the space for countries that have never really had the chance to compete on level ground.
Exactly.
Now we're entering a new digital economy, so all of those advantages that you had with your bricks and mortar and your infra, it's gone, it's out of the way. It's all up here now. And if one thing Filipinos are known for is the Filipino ingenuity. So we're putting this into this little, I guess, regulated space, so people all understand the rules, and then you can just let your creativity loose.
Exactly. And yeah, like one of the common problems we have in like the science sector, let's say, is that you have inventors, right? You have scientists. They're coming up with these amazing inventions, and then because they don't have the funding from the government, or they don't have personal money to kind of like, you know, patent it and register it, you know, you just lose the invention. But with the Philippine Startup Act, I think it's really going to pave the way for these scientists to actually become technopreneurs, you know, to market their own products and to create their own products, because it's not capital in what do you call it, intensive, yeah, to the person, because you can raise money through, you know, other people, right? And so these scientists now have an opportunity to actually put their products out there and to actually make it big and not completely reliant on whoever, right? So I think this law is not just, you know, like a dole out, like, okay, let's just give them money, but it actually provides support. So it creates that kind of sustainability in a way. Yeah.
Well, one can only imagine what might have happened if during when I was growing up, the rumor that a Filipino invented karaoke. I don't know if that's urban legend or not.
What year was that?
Oh, it was just recently, very recently.
Like 5 years
but
ago.
yeah, there was always this rumor about the Filipino actually invented the karaoke machine. I'm not sure if that's 100% true.
Instead
of the Japanese, but they had the technology to patent it.
Oh, okay.
Again, could be just an urban legend, but let's just use that as an anecdote of how many opportunities that Attorney Piñol just mentioned where they don't have the capital to be able to get that patent or be able to develop that technology. So being first to market was actually a handicap for them. It just gave the idea to somebody else.
Yes.
So this in a way protects them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've read this deep into it. I'm not sure if this is even your level of expertise, but does it talk about taxation in this space? Because surely taxation has got to change.
Yeah.
Is there anything in there that's changed with the law?
Yes. It actually provides for an eco-zone. So an eco-zone has like a different tax treatment for those that are under it. So right now the government is creating that eco-zone for startups. So you have like tax holidays and whatnot, tax breaks. Yeah.
Because this is obviously being new, the risks are very high. I mean, if you're also burdened with heavy taxes from the legacy system, when you don't have the same level of growth or the same growth pattern, that could also be something that stifles. And I think the whole idea is to not stifle innovation, but to actually encourage it, incentivize it. Okay, so I can already see quite a few benefits that you pointed out, but what are the other benefits of the law?
Right, yeah. So you have access to startup development programs like trainings and exchange programs. And you also have the government through the DTI linking startups to potential investors and even customers, both locally and abroad. And also you have the law providing or removing restrictions that burden startups and discourages growth. Because as you know, Tito James, in the business registration, right? Like it takes like forever sometimes. But with the law, it kind of like speeds things up for the startups.
Okay, can you just elaborate a little bit more on the startup visas?
Yeah, this is actually very interesting, you know, because when you're an investor, it's going to take some time to get visas. But with this law, you have three kinds of visas actually. First, you have the startup owner visa for prospective or current foreign owners of startups or startup enablers, so that are registered in the Philippines. Next, you have the startup employee visa for foreign employees of a startup or startup enabler. And you also have the startup investor visa for prospective or current foreign investors of a startup or startup enabler, right? So you have visas, and these are for free, you know, so
this
and
is
faster.
exciting.
Like you're gonna apply.
Well, I mean, I can think of a lot of people that would probably
be happy with it.
Yes,
yeah,
and not
sure.
necessarily from a startup point of view, but they're looking to solve maybe an immigration issue.
Oh, yeah.
And then they go down this route. Is that like a hack?
No, but if there's a genuine project.
Yes, I'm talking
for
genuine.
Sure.
It's like, look, you have investors before. I can't remember what the amounts were, but they were quite high. I mean, I think let's say the retirement visa was $80,000 US dollars. A lot of people availed of that, but you had to buy a unit. Some people not necessarily wanted to buy.
There's so many requirements.
There were, and I don't remember if you could choose the unit that you bought. They had to be pre-approved by the Philippine Retirement Association. So what I'm getting at here, or my creative brain is thinking, if there are people out there that are saying, well, maybe I could invest in a startup to actually first solve my primary motivations by immigration.
Right.
And I just happen to now have a...
Interesting, but I'm not gonna say yes.
Of course you can. Right, that's why you have me here, you see?
Yeah, I know. No, but I think you're gonna be a good lawyer.
Just thinking outside the box.
Yeah, but this visa is actually like multiple entries. You don't have to really think about the expiration or whatever, right? So it's very, very convenient for investors because you want to encourage trade and commerce in the Philippines,
Yes.
right? To go in and
Yes.
out. You don't want to like be locked down or whatever.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so this is also a really great thing. So it's the DFA who's going to be in charge of this.
And how soon do you think this would be rolled out?
I think quite soon. Yeah. I think it's moving along. I mean, this was passed in 2019, and then you have the IRR at the end of 2019, and so you have continuous movement. And there are already programs and projects by DTI and DOST. So I think it's very optimistic for me. I'm optimistic about this law.
And if you get this, because now I'm really genuinely fascinated by it in many levels and different layers of it now.
You're being creative.
Yes, of course, because I can sort of see how, if this was done in 2019, this was before the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
The pandemic has just accelerated everybody's digital plans, right? So now we have this ailing economy that we really need to restart.
Yeah.
This is the whole world, not just the Philippines. We're looking at innovative ways to start up this economy. This could just be the shot in the arm, no pun intended. But
get vaccinated.
There you go. This could vaccinate the economy, so to speak.
Nice. Okay.
But that's what's exciting me about it, because
Exactly.
we're becoming borderless, right? So if you can get a tech investor from wherever, whether it's the US, India, Europe, Australia, and they come over here because they're hunting for friendly jurisdictions.
Right. Exactly.
In the digital world, that's a click of a finger, a click of a mouse.
Exactly.
That's where you can really bring in those benefits.
Right.
So this is what excites me about it. So we don't have figures yet on the amounts you need to invest, but keep your eyes open for that, or keep your ears open. Stay tuned to the Pivot, because we will be keeping you up to date. Because this is the primary thrust of the show, is we really want people, especially those who are pivoting into a whole new startup, hence the term of the name of the show, to be able to know what's out there, so that they have all the tools available to them to succeed.
For sure, yeah. And you can even have as guests, like people from DFA and DTI and DOST to actually really talk about how it's being fleshed out by their agency, because they're the host agencies for this, as to the implementation side of the law. So that would be a really interesting episode to look out for.
Okay, so we're recovering some of the things because we've been talking about it for about 20 minutes now or so. So just want to go back a little bit. What are some of the government agencies that are given the responsibility to enact all of these features? We've talked already about the DFA being in charge of the immigration of the visas. DTI, is there anyone else notable that needs to be mentioned?
Yeah, the host agencies actually for this law are DOST, DICT, and DTI. So they're the ones who are in charge to implement the provisions of the law. So they're called the host agencies. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so much has been opened up here. I don't know if this is getting a little bit off course, but would you consider somebody like there's this Axie Infinity craze going on, right?
Okay.
Could they list themselves as a startup? I mean, they're technically playing to earn, right?
Right.
But if they set up themselves as a business, there's a big space there, right? The
yeah.
BIR has already kind of identified them as this is a space we need to regulate.
Yeah.
Would they fall under that, or is that, how do you see that?
I actually really don't know the details of how the game is played. But if they're going to register themselves, let's say as a Philippine corporation in the Philippines, it's a possibility. They could fall under that, right? If it's innovative, if they're giving out products that are, innovative in nature, and they're registered in the Philippines. So that could be a possibility, but I'm not quite sure actually. Do you actually have an Axie account?
No, I don't have one, but I know that the Philippines is one of the largest markets, if not the largest market in the world for Axie.
And it's helping a lot of
well, it is helping a lot, and people are genuinely using it for their income. So it's not just this has replaced their work.
Yeah.
Play to earn, we just scratched the absolute surface of it.
Yeah.
So trying to imagine how somebody could turn that into, instead of just a playing to earn on an individual level, creating, let's say, an Axie team or something along those lines, and then starting a company that develops talent to play for them.
Right.
Maybe you could also look at
but the thing with that with Axie is that it already has gained its traction. It already has that financial backing. I think what the law is really looking at are those that really cannot support themselves or need funding at the initial stages. So I think Axie is beyond the initial stages. I'm not so sure, but that could be another interesting topic for another episode, right? So we could have Axie players probably come in and help us explain the game itself. But
okay.
yeah, that could be a possibility.
While we're breaking down things like whether Axie fits into the mold and all this, can I run through a few case studies and maybe tell us whether they qualify or not?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let's say an individual who sells clothes now engages in online selling.
Right.
Is that considered a startup business?
Yeah. A lot of people are engaged in online selling, and it's actually very innovative, but not innovative as per the description or the definition of the law. So no, it's not a startup because it's also not tech enabled. Like there's no technology that was created for that line of business. They're kind of just like making use of Facebook, let's say. So the startup there is Facebook and not the selling itself. So it's not really like tech innovative product. So yeah, so it's by the definition of the law, it's not a startup.
Sorry
guys.
What about an individual who develops an app to connect shopping websites to logistics platform in order to sell products online? Is that considered?
Yeah, definitely that's a startup, right? So that's kind of like putting innovation on that online selling. So that's Shopee for you or Lazada, right? So yeah, end to end.
All right, an individual or ABC Corporation wants to establish a startup business. Who should they do to register their business, or where should they go, or what should they do to register their business?
Yeah, they have to go through the same kind of channels. You know, if they want to register themselves as sole proprietors, they register with a DTI. If it's a corporation, you register with the SEC, right? And so what just the difference that startup law makes for them is that it kind of speeds things up for them. If you want to secure, let's say, a mayor's permit, it's going to be easier for them if you have like the letter of approval or like the go signal from the DTI, DOST. Like you have to have a certification. That's what the IRR says. So yeah, it's going to be faster for them to register their businesses, but same line, SEC and also DTI.
All right, well that answers my questions, but you know what, I'm not the only one here. When we were doing this show, I'm sure you know this as well because we were all asking around. We compiled some questions from people who are genuinely looking at starting up a business. So let me dig up a couple of questions here.
Sure, yeah.
That maybe you can answer for us.
It's kind of like a free legal advice, right?
Absolutely, and this is what it's all about. You know what, to get your free legal advice nowadays, I mean, it's really cool. So here we go. Arthur Sombrito on Facebook asks, as a new startup, what are the first legal steps to undertake up to the point where it has to incorporate?
Right. Okay. So first you have to decide what structure you're going to be going for, right? Like sole prop or corporation. But from the question, it wants to incorporate. So I think they're going for corporation, right? For a corporate registration. So first of all, you have to come up with a business name or like a corporate name, right? Because sometimes, you know, you get attached to a name and then when you check with the SEC, it's actually taken already, right? So you have to come up with a very unique business name. You also have to think about who your partners will be, because if it's not a one-person corporation, it has to be, you know, at least two, right? So maximum 15. So yeah, think about who your partners will be and what structure you would want to take on as a business. And also you have to register with the SEC, right? So online registration can be done now. But I suggest, you know, this is kind of sounding biased because I'm a lawyer, but I suggest before you do anything, if you're a startup and you want to incorporate, you have to consult a lawyer, right? You don't consult a lawyer just when, you know, legal disputes come up or there are legal problems. You consult a lawyer precisely because you want to avoid those, you know, legal disputes, right? Because startups can have a very unique corporate structure, and a lawyer should advise you on how to go about that to really better protect yourself. So yeah, so get a lawyer and also incorporate through the SEC. It's quite fast now online, right? So after that, you go to the barangay, get your clearance, mayor's permit, things like that. BIR registration is important, and also SSS if you have like employees. So those are the kind of like the flow of the steps. Yeah.
Well, that's good advice because, you know, what you're effectively trying to do is you can't just put an analog framework on a new digital economy because it's just a square peg round hole
for sure,
thing. So don't assume that whatever worked in the analog world, whether it was SEC compliance, etc., is exactly the same. And this is all attorneys getting at is that whether you go through attorney here or attorney down the road, it doesn't matter. But just seek advice because you don't want to get in too deep and then find out you're in the wrong direction.
For sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, here's a related question from Noel just says Noel G.
Okay.
Since you define startups as any person or registered entity, it can be a single proprietorship or company, right?
Yeah. So it can be single prop if you want to do it on your own. Then you just register with a DTI. If you want to incorporate, then you register with the SEC. But with the recent amendments or the recent changes in the corporation code, you have a one-person corporation now. So you can also go with that. So you can either go solo or you can incorporate.
Okay, I have a very question that really worries me here because it's coming from my manager. She's asking what are the other benefits that the Startup Act brings. I don't know if it's a hint or if she's trying to look for something new.
I think there's like a Christmas bonus and like
let me just answer.
100x raise.
There are no benefits to this. The only benefit is here, and just keep managing this, and you'll be fine. But for any other manager that asks that question, what would you say to that? What are the other benefits of the Startup Act?
Well, so the Startup Act basically just empowers, investors and enablers. That's the term that was used by the law. So these are those that are investing or like providing goods and services, right? So other than the trainings and the other programs, you actually have DOST that caters to, let's say, students who have like inventions, right? So they have infrastructure for them where they can test their products and they can like explore and be more creative. So the DOST provides that for them.
All right, there was quite a smorgasbord that we just consumed here, so there's just so much. And we did promise to put it down to bite-sized pieces, so why don't we just do a little quick recap for those who have either just joined us or those who are just trying to put it all into a flow again. What is the first step for somebody who's looking to get into it? Who should they contact? Where should they get their... What's step one?
Yeah, step one would definitely be talk to your lawyer. As biased as that may sound, our law firm actually caters to startups. That's really our passion, We really want to help them incorporate and, take away the pain points that they have. The corporate structure can be very tricky, so you have to start with that. Like, how am I going to give out shares to my partners, things like that. So you have to lay it all down. And then so first of all, you come up with a corporate name or a business name, and then you reserve that name because somebody might, take it away from you, or you've copied or whatever. It's already taken. And then also, so you have to register either with a DTI or the SEC. And then you also have to register with a BIR, right, for tax purposes, and register with your LGU for mayor's permit, barangay clearance, things like that, and then SSS and all these benefits, right? So if you have employees, so those are the overview of things. But basically, if you want to get hold of the incentives and the benefits of the Startup Act, you collaborate and you coordinate with the DTI, the ICT, and the DOST.
Okay, that's a good starting point. Let's just consider like your lawyer as the ways, right? You're mapping out the route first. You need to know where you're going. You need to know the directions of where you're going before you even have plans what you're going to do in your destination.
Exactly.
Have that route pre-mapped. And then, of course, once you get to that stage, you'll pretty much know they'll lead you down. By that stage, you're going to be pushed down the pipe, so to speak, because you've been given that direction. There's SEC, there's mayor's permit, just as attorney mentioned. But at least if you start with that step, you're going to be able to get into the right sort of foundation to build.
Yeah, and I understand why people hesitate to consult a lawyer. But some of them actually bootleg it and just download like templates of contracts and do the registration on their own, which is understandable. But then when you encounter problems along the way, you're gonna have to start from scratch, right? So if your articles of incorporation, let's say, were not properly laid out, then you're gonna have to go back from the very step one, right? And so that's more expenses for you and more time lost for you. So it's really better to go safe and consult a lawyer. Yeah.
In the old world, they said measure twice, cut once.
Oh, nice.
Right. So that's kind of similar here. You just want to make sure that you get the directions all correct so that you don't waste any time in getting to where you need to go. Well, that's pretty much it. That's all we have time for on this first episode. It was a pretty deep dive. I hope there was things that you learned from this, and if you didn't learn everything you need to learn, don't worry. It's just getting you on the vehicle, on the track to doing what you really want to do. So Tune in for more episodes of The Pivot. If you like this show, make sure you click that like button and the subscribe and the notifications bell so that you're always aware of the latest of what's happening in this startup world. We're here for great advice. So till next week, my name's been James Deakin.
And I'm attorney Bernice Piñol. And this show was brought to you by the law firm of Piñol, Santos and Associates. And we'd like to thank everyone who watched this first episode. A really exciting one. You know, I had so much fun and I can't wait for all the other episodes to come up. And so we'd like to thank all of our sponsors, Mama Lou's and Home Lab, of course, for keeping us safe this afternoon. Did you like our lunch?
I loved it. The pizza
Mama
was
Lou's, the
deadly.
bomb. I know. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. We had fun. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.